My next guest has been in touch with us. He's campaign director for Legalise Vaping Australia, and he has some differing views and indeed what he says is differing research on this topic. Brian Marlow, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, you emailed us. You wanted to highlight some facts that you say differ from what Sarah White was telling us. What issues do you have with what she said in that interview?
I have a couple of issues. I think that some of what Sarah White said about vaping acting as a potential gateway and saying that we only have anecdotal evidence that vaping helps people quit is just incorrect. If I actually read a direct quote from the United Kingdom's public health group, Public Health England, they've actually said when it comes to gateway theory or young people taking up vaping, they've said, quote unquote, in contrast to recent media reports, we are not seeing a surge in e-cigarette use among young people in Britain. According to their latest evidence update from February 2019, they're saying that while experimentation may increase, vaping amongst young people remains low, and rising experimentation is unsurprising. But the crucial point is that they're not seeing a surge in regular use, and only 0.2% of those who have never smoked are regular e-cigarette users. So we're talking about statistical anomalies here, and that's not anecdotal evidence. That's evidence coming from a public health group over in the UK.
So they're saying that there's no increase in vaping, which means there's no increase in smoking. But in the US, Sarah White says it's a slow train wreck where teens are smoking more now, that the trend of declining smoking rates is reversing.
So I think the issue with the United States is that they don't have a proper risk-proportionate regulatory framework for vaping. So no one here in any of the advocacy groups that support legalisation of vaping want to have an unregulated model here. We do believe in some risk-proportionate regulations around vaping and who it can be sold to and how. So the American case study, I'd say, is the outlier. When you look at New Zealand, when you look at the UK, when you look throughout the EU, you're not seeing these increases in youth smoking rates or even youth vaping rates because they have some basic regulations around these products.
But then again, you're seeing people who are, smoking more.
In the US, but again, the reason for that is because there's not a proper risk-proportionate regulation system over in the US for vaping products and for even tobacco products. Here in Australia, you have to be over 18 if you go into a vape shop to buy a vape. You have to be over 18 if you want to buy a tobacco product. You have to meet some basic standards. We have packaging laws on tobacco products, and we have some basic labelling standards and advertising standards and things like that. When you look over in the United Kingdom, who have similar regulations to what we do, they're not having that happen. And the evidence is clear. I mean, the Public Health England is saying only 0.2% of people who have never smoked are regular e-cigarette users.
So do you believe it helps more people give up, or do you believe it helps more people actually start smoking?
I'm a firm believer that it helps people quit smoking, and that's not just from me. I've met thousands of vapers who have tried every other method under the sun to try and quit, from patches and gum to even hypnotherapy, and the only thing that made them quit was vaping with nicotine. We've got the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists saying that e-cigarettes provide a less harmful alternative, and that the concerns put out by Cancer Council and Quit Victoria and stuff, if I read their quote, does not justify withholding what is, on the current evidence, a lower risk product. So it's not just overseas health bodies. We've got Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, the Drug and Alcohol Nurses of Australia, all saying that these products should be legalised here because they are helping people quit smoking.
At the moment in Victoria, for example, the shop that's just opened, you can go in and buy vaping products, but that's all without nicotine. You're talking about vaping, with a little bit of nicotine in there. That would help people cut down on their nicotine consumption, right? So is that what you would like to see legalised in Victoria?
Yes, we would. Some people can actually quit by switching to vaping that doesn't even have nicotine in it. But the vast majority of vapers, what they actually end up doing is they might buy their non-nicotine liquids from a local vape shop, and then they buy nicotine from overseas that they can then mix themselves, or they buy nicotine liquids from overseas, because the nicotine is the thing that they actually want out of a cigarette, but the nicotine's not the chemical that causes all of the harms associated with smoking. It's the burning of the tobacco leaf and, the tar and carcinogens that are created as a result.
So, therefore, you're saying it's a much healthier option, even if it does contain nicotine?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a harmless option, but it's much less harmful, about 95% less harmful.
What do you think of the idea of a prescription or, more pharmacy regulation to acquire vaping products?
So the issue with that is that I don't need a prescription to go and get patches on gum. And in order to do that, as Sarah White mentioned, these products would have to go through a TGA process. Now, that sounds all well and good, but the costs to actually do that are in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these products through that process. And the overwhelming majority of vape businesses all throughout Australia, they're small businesses that employ maybe 5 or 6 people tops. They can't afford to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to send a product through the Therapeutic Goods Administration when they're not even making a therapeutic claim. So they're not saying that this is going to cure you or that it's 100% going to help you quit. We just know that it does in other countries help people quit. Public Health England says vaping helps about 20,000 people quit per year, or potentially more. So it's not a therapeutic claim in the same way that if I go to a supermarket and buy a reduced fat product, that product didn't have to go through the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
But nonetheless, there are still those, and you heard what the Quit Victoria had to say, who firmly believe that vaping gives people the opportunity to see what it's like to smoke, and who might then turn to a more harmful product after that. There is that argument. Do you understand where they're coming from there?
I absolutely do. It's something that we should have an appropriate regulatory framework to try and prevent. So, if people are listening out there and they don't smoke and they don't vape, do not take up vaping. This is not a product for you. This is a product for people who have not been able to quit smoking. And I understand the concern, but I guess the only thing that I can point to is the overwhelming evidence that's showing, from the United Kingdom and from New Zealand and from other countries, that this gateway theory isn't actually backed up by the evidence. Even the CSIRO here in Australia reviewed the gateway theory and said that it's not actually backed up by any strong evidence.
So why do you think Quit Victoria is arguing to the contrary?
Well, as Sarah White mentioned, they have a precautionary approach to these products. When in reality what they should have is a harm reduction approach. So are these products harmless? No, they're not, but they're significantly less harmful than the current products that kill 2 in 3 users.
Interesting to talk with you, Brian. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Brian Marlow is Campaign Director of Legalise Vaping Australia.